So this year marks the 7th anniversary of the end of World War II. And thanks be to God, we have not had a World War III. And I think we have to go back to the origins of World War II to help us focus on that we should never have a World War III again. Of course, it began with Hitler in Germany, the rise of the Aryan race, and wanting to have more living space, Lebensraum, for the Aryan race, and so therefore to take over countries and to build an empire. Well, what Hitler wanted to do was really to promote not only the legitimacy of his regime, but the superiority of the Aryan race, of the German peoples. And so he wanted to profile that at the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin. And so he wanted to feature some of the great athletes under his regime. And one of them was Louis Long, who was a European record holder in the long jump. Now he is arch rival of the world record holder at the time was Jesse Owens, a black American. So here is this perfect way for Hitler to say, I'm the best, my people are the best. Is Louis Long, a white German, versus Jesse Owens, a black American? Who's going to win? Well, unfortunately, Jesse Owens, for his first 2 qualifying long jumps, was disqualified because he went over the board. Unbeknownst to him, Louis Long comes up to him and says, listen, if you really want to qualify, make a point of jumping before you hit the board, so you'll qualify for sure. And sure enough, Jesse Owens made his 3rd jump and qualified. And so Louis Long in the finals jumped a world record length. Jesse Owens exceeded that, and therefore Jesse Owens won the gold medal, and Louis Long won the silver medal. And afterward, even Louis Long came up to Jesse Owens to congratulate him, and so the authorities within the Nazi regime were very, very upset about that a German went to greet a black American. Now, Louis Long kept a correspondence with Jesse Owens during the time, and eventually would die in battle in 1943. Now, Jesse Owens really appreciated the friendship. For all the medals and all the awards that he had received, he said, you can melt all that down, but it doesn't make up for the treasure I received, the 24-karat experience of having a friendship with Louis Long. In fact, he said this friendship was his greatest accomplishment in all the Olympics, more so than any award that he won. And so because Louis Long shared a friendship with Jesse Owens considered that his greatest treasure. And likewise with us, when we share a friendship with Jesus, with others, that is the greatest treasure that they can receive. Now Jesus, throughout his public ministry, has always went about restoring friendships. And when people do not have good relationships, that's where wars are created in the human heart and also in the world. And so that's why Jesus says, love your enemies, do good to those who persecute you. He also says in John's Gospel, there's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And so the early church had received the blessing of the Lord, had allowed the Lord to abide in them. Jesus ascends into heaven, and it's like, what in the world do we do next? So really to extend this friendship with the whole world. Now our first reading today is taken from Acts chapter 9, which is really, I think, the pivotal chapter in all of Acts of the Apostles, because the Acts of the Apostles is really the church going out from Jerusalem into the world, but has this critical point in Acts chapter 9. And what is that pivotal moment? What to do about Paul. Paul is he's not a great friend of the church. In fact, he is its greatest enemy at the time. That Acts chapter 9 verse 1 says that he was breathing fury and murderous threats against those who followed the way. What he wanted to do, going towards Damascus, is to imprison all those who followed the way, the Christian way, imprison and bring them back to Jerusalem. What to do about Paul? And of course, we know about Paul's conversion on the way to Damascus. But nobody wants to be his friend. They know he's a great enemy of the faith. And so there are 5 individuals and groups that have an opportunity to befriend St. Paul. And their responses are intriguing. Like, who is a true friend to St. Paul? The first one is Ananias. So the Lord speaks to Ananias and says, listen, you've got to pray over St. Paul and bring him to the faith. But Ananias said, well, I'm very hesitant because he's done these evil things to your holy ones. So Ananias, is he a true friend? I mean, he does what the Lord says, but in terms of what we think about friends, maybe, maybe not. The next group are the Christians in Damascus. They've heard about all the terrible things that Paul has done and are very leery about having him come into the community. Also, the Jews in Damascus, in fact, want to kill St. Paul. Next, the group are the disciples, as we just heard in our first reading today, that they are very afraid because of all the things that he has done. And think, I don't know if we can accept this guy. I don't want to be his friend. He's our enemy. I think the fifth individual or group that really makes an effort to welcome St. Paul is Barnabas. Now, Acts of the Apostles chapter 4 introduces Barnabas. And there are two things I think that are significant about Barnabas. Is one, his name means son of encouragement. And also it says that he had sold a piece of property and put at the feet of the disciples. So he is one of who's received grace, encouragement, and in turn showed remarkable generosity. So Barnabas himself has heard about Paul and probably could have said, I don't really want to be his friend. But in fact, he vouches for him. So he took him, it says, and brought him up to the disciples and said, listen, this guy has seen the Lord, he has heard about him, and has proclaimed him boldly in Damascus. And the church then accepts him. But the church only accepts him because Paul has a friend in Barnabas. Now imagine if Barnabas did not befriend Paul, that Paul was converted to the faith but didn't have a relationship with any member of the church. Well, half of the New Testament would not have been written, for sure. He's written probably almost half of the writings of the New Testament. The church would not be in Chestermere, I don't think, today, if it were not for Barnabas befriending St. Paul. And neither would the church have enabled the richness of faith in Jesus and the grace that come with it to all the world. If we think about the institutions that the church has founded and just being able to proclaim the Lord, how good that is for the world. So if Paul had not been befriended by Barnabas, our faith would not be as rich as it is today. And so sharing friendship with Jesus, sharing his friendship with others, is the greatest treasure. Of course, the Pope before, Pope Francis, was Pope Benedict. And the central theme of Pope Benedict's pontificate was to have a friendship with the Lord, to allow the Lord to abide in us. I think him and John Paul II and all the previous popes see renewal only in having the Lord abide in each Christian and in the whole church. And if the church just goes about being mechanical in terms of its worship or its activity, it's missing the boat. It's almost like a pruning, as Jesus says in today's gospel. And so if we have the Lord abide in us, we can do marvelous things. And so if we have a friend in Jesus, he abides us, we can do great things. We can be instruments of unity and peace. I think one of the great gestures of friendship that we show to one another at this Mass today is the sign of peace. So Jesus in Matthew chapter 5 says that if you have an offering to the Lord, make your peace before your brother or sister who has something against you, and then offer your sacrifice. I think the sign of peace kind of adapts that to say, well, when we give a sign of peace to another, we're almost saying, yeah, we're making peace with the whole world before we receive our sacrifice, before we even offer our lives in the Eucharist. I think when we offer the sign of peace, it's saying, okay, we want peace and unity in the world. How can there be peace and unity in the world if there's not peace and unity in the church? And I think if we allow the Lord to abide us in our gesture of peace, at the sign of peace, and even at the Eucharist, we can do remarkable things. And as we're sent out, just as the apostles were sent out, it's not always easy. It's easy to be friends with people who like us, but what about our enemies? And I think we have to look at the example of Luz Long and Barnabas to say, well, who are the people who are like St. Paul? Very, very talented, but maybe misguided about the faith, about what they're doing. And I think they need a friend. They need someone to kind of vouch for them, encourage them. Or maybe even to say, well, who are the people in my life that I have a hard time dealing with? They're my enemies. Say, well, maybe they need a friendship. And we can do that because we have friendship in the Lord, which then allows us to share friendship with others. So the whole world would have been lacking in the treasures of Jesse Owens and St. Paul, but weren't for the friendships offered to them by Luz Long and St. Barnabas. And so let us share with others the abiding presence of the Lord in our life through his word, his body, but to those who are enemies to us, or those who have no friends, in need of friends. I think by doing so, we can truly become instruments of peace and unity in the world. So as we celebrate the end of World War II this year for the 70th anniversary, that we can ensure there will not be a World War III.